What would you do if your friend kept trying to talk to the dead for fun, and then one night in a cemetery, she changed completely? This is After the Fire Stories, where I tell scary stories after the fire has gone out. So grab your favorite snack, your emotional support drink, and settle in because today's story is about a woman who says that she went to the cemetery with her friend and she never saw her again. Hi, I've never told this to anyone before all the way through, and even then, I left parts out because saying it out loud makes me feel insane. This happened only a few years ago when I was in college, and I'm not old. This wasn't decades ago, and I still think about it all the time because I genuinely do not know what happened to that girl after that night. I knew her from school. We weren't best friends exactly, but we had a few classes together and started hanging out because we both stayed up late and lived in the same general area off campus. She was kind of odd, but not in a bad way. Quiet, kind of intense, and very into death stuff, old cemeteries, spirit communication, all things like that. She was one of those people who had some weird story or some theory about energy or the dead listening if you were in the right place at the right time. She didn't really have social media and didn't seem very close to anybody, and she had a couple acquaintances, but no big friend group. I think that's part of why I ended up hanging out with her more than I otherwise might have. I felt a little bad for her, honestly. And at first, it was harmless. She liked going to old graveyards at night, and I know that sounds like the beginning of a bad idea because it was, but at the time, it felt more stupid than dangerous. We'd drive out somewhere old, walk around, read names on headstones, maybe sit in the car and talk, and she would bring candles and sometimes, or ask questions out loud just to see. I always thought it was embarrassing more than scary, and I went because I was bored. She kept talking about wanting proof. That was her word. She said people are always around the dead and nobody notices because nobody really listens. I told her I was not trying to get haunted over some random Tuesday, and she'd laugh. The night everything happened was in October. I remember that because it was cold enough when I wore a hoodie and wished I'd brought a heavier jacket. We drove out to this old cemetery, maybe 20 minutes off campus. It was small and there was trees around it. No houses right next to it, and we had been there once before during the day and it looked normal enough. At night, it felt different right away. I should have trusted that and left. She had brought a bag with candles and some old-looking little board thing, not exactly a Ouija board, but basically the same energy. I told her I was not helping with that, and she said fine, I didn't have to. She'd set up near the older section with shorter stones and one big tree. I remember being irritated because the ground was damp and I didn't want to stay there that long. At first, nothing happened. She sat there asking questions in this low voice and pausing, asking more questions, and then getting annoyed when nothing answered. And I was standing a few feet away with my phone flashlight, mostly wanting to go home. And then she got very still. I asked if she was okay, and she didn't answer me. I thought maybe she was trying to scare me, so I told her to stop. Still nothing. Then she started breathing heavily, differently, deep and slow, like she'd run a long way and was trying to calm down. I took a few steps closer, and that's when she said, in a voice that was not hers at all, "Don't stand there." I actually laughed for half a second because it felt so fake that my brain didn't catch up right away. And then she lifted her head and looked at me. I don't know how to explain her face other than it looked wrong. Not like movie possession head spinning. Her mouth looked stretched, too wide somehow, like the muscles around it were pulling in a way I had never seen on a real person. And her eyes looked unfocused but locked on me at the same time. I backed up immediately and said her name, and she stood up way too fast. That's the part I still see in my head. 1 second she was on the ground, and the next she was upright. She didn't wobble or push herself up off the ground. She was just up somehow. Then she started walking toward me. Not running at first, just walking. Her head tilted a little to one side, and she kept making this low sound in her throat like she was trying to clear it. I kept saying her name louder and louder, and finally she said again in that deep voice, "You brought me one." Then she ran at me. I turned and ran too. I could hear her behind me, and I know people will probably say maybe she was just having some kind of mental breakdown and chasing me, except I could hear her laughing and then making this choking noise and then laughing again like it hurt. I got to my car and fumbled the keys so bad I thought I was going to die right there because my hands would not work. I finally got in, I locked the doors, and when I looked up, she was standing in front of the car. Just standing there. Then she bent down a little and looked in at me through the windshield and smiled. And her mouth looked too big. That is what I remember the clearest. I threw the car in reverse so hard I almost hit a stone, turned around, and got out of there. I did not call the police. I know maybe I should have. At the time, I was young and terrified, and all I wanted was to get away from her and that place. I drove back to campus and sat in a grocery store parking lot for probably over an hour. I kept expecting her to call me, and she never did. The next day, I texted her and tried calling, and she never picked up or responded. I went by the apartment building she lived in, and I didn't know her unit number, just the building, but I never saw her again. I asked around a little bit after that without sounding too crazy. Most people barely knew her. One girl from one of our classes said she thought maybe she dropped out, and another person said they heard she moved. Nobody seemed certain. Nobody seemed especially concerned either, which honestly bothered me. But she was quiet and didn't have much of a circle, so I guess people just accepted it. It only had been a couple years, but still, she never had any socials that I knew about, so I couldn't check on her that way either. And I still think about whether I should have gone back and looked for her that night. And then I think about the way she looked standing in front of my car, and I know I wouldn't have. I don't go near cemeteries at night now, not even for normal reasons, and I don't mess around with any of the talk to the dead stuff anymore either. Absolutely not. Her standing and smiling at you through the windshield would completely, I think, ruin my sleep for the rest of my life. This has been After the Fire Stories. If you have any scary stories or paranormal experiences, then go ahead and send them in to me, and I might read yours next.
A lady in her 50s now was telling me a ghost story recently, and it happened to her grandmother, so a pretty long time ago. And it was at an old nursing home just outside of Liverpool. Now, it was a nursing home in the old, Victorian sense. So it was, I think, a former nunnery before that. And she was around the age of 19 when she got employment there. She got a job. So very first night, she had a ghostly encounter. And apparently finding out, later in life, this building was notoriously haunted and it was known amongst the locals. It doesn't exist anymore. But, so the story goes, our granddaughter told it to me, is that she starts work one night. And, it's quite a cold winter's night. The weather's terrible outside. It's that sort of classic spooky atmosphere before she's even started the shift in this place. Now, there's a bottom floor, like a cellar's, where the laundry is, So she's got this big hamper. It's just after midnight. She's doing the night shifts and goes to take it down. As she's loading the laundry hamper, she gets this overwhelming sensation that there's somebody stood to the side of her. But she's that terrified by this feeling, she daren't even look. So, as she lifts herself up to quickly make a run for it up the stairs, in one of the little side windows at the top of the basement, she catches a reflection, and at the side of her, there is a completely naked old man stood there. Horrifying. She quickly spins around to scream, and her granddaughter tells it as the old man's mouth opened supernaturally wide and looked black inside, and she said the smell was appalling. All this happening, by the way, in a matter of flat seconds. So following this, she runs screaming up the staircase, throws the washing basket. She's in a right state, as you would imagine. But at this point, she still doesn't think it's a ghost. She thinks it's some absolute creepy nutter. Gets to the top of the staircase. The manager's there. She points down the stairs to say, but you can clearly see the full length of this little laundry part of the cellar now, and there is not a soul in there. And the only way in and out is through this flight of stairs that she's just ran up away from this bloody ghost. And it's all confirmed that indeed it is a ghost, because she goes on to, hysterically says to this manager woman, I'm not going back down there. I've seen a spirit. It was horrible. He was evil. You know, very religious times. She's clutching onto a crucifix around her neck. She simply says to her, if you want a job, you'll get back down there and finish. How vile is that? Can you imagine?
Hello and welcome back to a series of spooky stories, The Haunted Tea Spill. This series is brought to you by all things spooky and ungodly amounts of paranormal activity. Something new today, this is actually a smart ring. This was offered to me, so I obviously accepted it because I can't afford an Apple Watch and I think that would be cool to keep up with my health stuff. This actually keeps up with your sleep, it can check your oxygen saturation, your steps, obviously, your body temperature, your stress levels. I thought that was really interesting. It's not just in gold, it's also in silver, but I chose gold. If you like it, it's down here. Now onto the story. So my name is Ray. I had played with the Ouija board with my siblings against my better judgment. And I believed that this had caused my experience with ghosts. Probably, yeah. I was 14 and staying with my aunt and her husband in a different state. They lived in a very old house that didn't feel right from the moment that I stepped in. One night I'm laying in bed, and in the corner of my room is a 6-foot man in all black. Was he wearing a hat? I slept with my lights on after that. A few weeks later, I'm on FaceTime with my sister. I was in the kitchen and my back is to the door leading to the living room. She asked me who was awake beside me. I said, nobody, since it's around 2 to 3 a.m. The best time for spooky shit. And she says she saw that same black figure that I did just walk from the direction of the stairs towards the dining room door, which was to my left. It was definitely the Ouija board. Definitely. I saw it out of the corner of my eye but said nothing and took my avocado and sat in the living room till morning. Wouldn't have been able to eat that avocado after that. Over the next few months that I stayed, I experienced sleep paralysis. That black figure always planted right beside me, staring down at me. And the black figure would also appear, especially when I went into the basement. I always had a feeling of being watched there. I later found out that the house was built sometime in the early 50s and it was home to a family of 4. Did anything happen to any of these family members? By chance? That house is creepy, and my grandma says that she feels like she's being watched and she sleeps in my old room. Said it before and I'll say it again. How about we just stop fucking with the Ouija boards? How about we just do that? Just leave them alone. Don't touch them. Rate on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being the least scary, creepy, spooky, 10 being the most. If you have a story of your own that you want to submit, you can do so on the link tree in my profile. I will see y'all at the next episode. Stay spooky, friends.
Talk more about the men in black and underground bunkers, shall we? We got another military spooky scary storytime submission from someone who we're going to call Anthony for the story. Anthony wants to be anonymous for security clearance reasons, which I totally understand. But he says he was transferred from Okinawa to a military base in Southern California. Anthony was very excited about this transfer. He had some friends that were already at the base, and he was going to be a garrison MP, which I understand to mean military police. And this is different than the type of military police work, I should say, that he was doing. Garrison MPs deal more with civilian type police work and more patrolling, so they do like clearances at the gate, they check IDs, base security, and this is just how he explained it to me, so don't come for me if I'm wrong. I have no military experience, okay? But Anthony says after being at this base for some time, he realized that there was another part of the base, and we're gonna call this part of the base East Base. Getting real creative here, okay? But he says that probably military people who have been at this base know what he's talking about, but he says there's one way into this base and one way out. East Base is pretty much empty. There's no barracks, no battalions, and no personnel really. There is a security shack on East Base. He says there must be a security guard at all times, either at the security shack or patrolling. And sometimes people do go over there either to get things out of storage or to go to the range. Often, if you were working on East Base at the security guard shack or patrolling, you would be out there for hours without seeing a single soul. And he says he worked mid-shift, so 12 p.m. to midnight usually. He realized pretty quickly that what he was guarding on East Base was 4 large bunkers that even he did not have clearance to enter. He was told that these were just storage, but he said the locks on them were so massive, so industrial, that they were unlike any military locks he had seen before. They were not normal military locks. These were something different entirely. But after months and months of working this post with no activity on East Base, one day an all-black SUV pulls up to the security post, and the window rolls down, and there are 4 men inside with mirrored sunglasses, all wearing dark suits. Tell Anthony they've already been given clearance to enter and already cleared it with his command, and as they're telling him this, his phone rings. It was his command, and they said these men have clearance to enter. And he said he asked for their IDs, they handed them over reluctantly, and he said their tone was monotonous and they all strangely looked the same. But when he checked their IDs, he saw a logo on there that he did not recognize. It was not the CIA, it was not the FBI, it was not Secret Service. It was not base personnel, it was not military. He says, I have no idea what this logo was, but as quickly as they gave the IDs, they took them away. And they told him that more black SUVs would be arriving shortly and that they also had clearance to enter. He said, you can confirm this with your command if you need to, and they proceeded on base, and he did in fact confirm, and all of the black SUVs that then arrived were also allowed to enter. Anthony watches his first black SUV drove off in the direction of the bunkers, and soon the rest of the convoy of the black SUVs arrived, and they also proceeded on base in the direction of the bunkers. And he said that they all showed him the same IDs with the same logo as the first SUV, and all of these men were also dressed similar in dark suits and mirror sunglasses, and they all also looked the same. Later, Anthony went to close the gate for the night, and these men still hadn't come out. So curious, he went to patrol, and he saw that they were in fact at one of the bunkers, and they had a man posted up outside, and people were coming in and out. He had been told that this specific bunker that they were at housed a crashed plane, and he never questioned it. He never had reason to, but he said as he saw some men come out, he got a glimpse inside, and what was inside did not look like a crashed plane. In fact, he said what he saw did not look human-made at all. It was a pitch black object. He said it was so deep in color that you could barely make out the shape, except he knew that it was an object because people were standing around it. Just as quickly as the door opened, the door shut behind the people coming out, and he said he lost sight of it. However, it didn't look like any military aircraft that he had ever seen. He's not even sure it was an aircraft. He was still curious, so he started driving around the base looking for a higher point of view to watch the bunker. At this point, it was the middle of the night, and he said it was pitch black outside, so nobody could see him sitting up there. And slowly he saw people coming out of the bunker, and he saw them getting in their vehicles, and he knew that they were probably headed out, and he had to be at the post to let them leave. Watches them load up into their respective SUVs, and he's waiting for a call on his radio for someone to tell him to go meet them at the gate to let them leave, but nobody calls him. And after they all pack into the SUVs, they actually head in the opposite direction of the gate. They go further east, and he said that direction is very hilly, it's very rocky, and it's very easy to get lost if you don't know where you're going. He was confused as to why they were heading in this direction because there's no exit from that side of the base. He said it's just hills and rocks, and then it ends in a rock quarry. Said it dead ends, so he started to follow them to see where they were off to, but he said they were moving so fast that he couldn't keep up. As he's reaching the end of East Base, he's thinking he's finally going to catch up to them, but then he reaches the quarry and he looks down and he sees that there's no one down there. It's just him and he's all alone. He said he spent the rest of his shift trying to find them, eventually ending up at the security post, and saw that they had never left. He said he never saw this group of men again, and he says he doesn't know who they were, he doesn't know what was in that bunker. When he brought it up to his command, he was told not to ask questions, don't bring it up again, and he was threatened with insubordination. He said, I never brought it up to my command again, but I still think about it to this day. That bunker haunts me. And he said he has tried to ask other people who were stationed at that base, but nobody knows what he's talking about. Or they joked and say, you're crazy, you spent too much time out there alone. But he says, I know I'm not crazy. I know what I saw. So what are we thinking? Paranormal, conspiratorial adjacent? Let me know your thoughts, and if you have a spooky scary story time you think nobody would believe, send it in. We would love to hear it.
That blood is thicker than water, but in this situation, you can cross oceans, and your bloodline will always warn you about something. I will be changing people's names for this story. Now let's get into it. Now, Crystal states it was around 3 o'clock in the morning when she heard someone call her outside her bedroom door. Now, she tried to dismiss the voice. She turned over away from the door, looked at her partner, realized he was sleeping, and she said maybe she dreamt it. Maybe there's no one outside her door, so she went back to sleep. That's when the voice called her name again. And when the voice called her name again, this time it sounded inside the bedroom. So her refusing to turn over, look towards the door, or anywhere near where the voice came from, she just cuddled closer to her partner and closed her eyes. She was not looking. And as she's laying there, she's like, it's just in my head, it's just in my head, it's just in my head, it's just in my head. That's when the voice came over to her and said, it's not just in your head, Crystal. Her only response to that entity or whatever that was what? And she knew deep down she should have never answered it, but she couldn't take it anymore. She was petrified, and that's the only thing that she could do was say what back to it. And when she opened up her eyes, there was nobody there. So she decided to get out of bed, which honestly I would have never got out of bed, but she got out of bed, turned on the lights. She didn't see no one in the room. She checked the hallway, checked downstairs. All the doors were locked. She couldn't understand where the voice came from, so she just decided to sit on the bed and just wait for daybreak. And when daybreak came, she called her mom and asked her mom, do you have any idea what could it have been calling me at night? And her mom said to her, when you hear voices at night calling your name, never respond. That's usually death coming, and it's coming either for you, a family member, or someone you may know. So you should never respond to these kinds of entities. So of course, she was worried because she had responded out of fear and frustration because the voice kept calling her name. So later on that day,
She received a call from one of her relatives overseas, letting her know that a family member had passed away exactly at 3 o'clock in the morning. And that's when it hit her. It was actually death. It was death coming at the door, letting her know that they were coming, and they were coming to retrieve a soul. Now, whose soul, she didn't know until now. But what do you guys think? Do you guys think that was death? Do you guys think it was a relative? What do you guys think that was?
The story that I'm about to share with you might make you never want to babysit again. Does anybody actually like babysitting? Because I feel like the idea of me being responsible for a kid, scary. Like, we don't need no scary story. So this girl says that she'd been taking care of her little cousin Tony for about 2 months. Tony had been staying with the grandmother, and unfortunately the grandmother had passed away. Tony's parents actually worked a lot, and because of this passing, they were gonna have to get used to having somebody take care of Tony. So they had assigned her to babysit him just for the meantime until they can figure out something else. She explains how it wasn't a big deal for her to take care of Tony. She really enjoyed him. He was a nice kid, and she actually took advantage of the fact that she had 2 months off, and that way her uncle and her aunt had time to, get somebody to take care of him. Now, out of nowhere, Tony got like a really big scratch on his face, and then the next day he had a bruise on his arm. Obviously the parents were worried because he had a scratch and a bruise, and they went up to her and asked what happened, and she honestly had no idea. Tony also didn't say anything. He was at an age where he could talk, he could walk, like he could form sentences, and he would continue to get excited every time she would come to the house to babysit, every time he would see her. So it's obvious like she wasn't hurting him. She knew she wasn't hurting him, but he also wasn't telling his parents why he had a scratch, why he had a bruise, so nobody knew how he was getting this. Now, randomly, she would walk in on Tony talking by himself, or him laughing like somebody said the funniest thing, but there was never anybody in the room with him. She would even try to surprise him and walk in his room to see if anybody else was in there, and there was no one there. So she knew that something weird was happening. Until then, she just thought that maybe that was him grieving, maybe he had made an imaginary friend, and she wasn't letting the fact that he had gone to something traumatizing because he actually saw the grandmother pass away. She was just like, maybe this is his form of, feeling normal, feeling like himself again. So she didn't think it was anything too strange at that point. After all of this, something happened, something that she was able to see with her own eyes that she still thinks about till this day. So she had gotten to Tony's house where he lived with his parents, and she was making him breakfast, and out of nowhere, Tony started crying and screaming at her, saying, "Why did you pull my hair? Why did you pull my hair?" She ended up getting mad at Tony because she's like, "What do you mean? I didn't pull your hair, and you're obviously lying. That's not okay for you to be lying about things like that." After he calmed down a little bit, he accepted the fact that someone did pull his hair, but that he didn't see who it was, and because she was the only one in the house, he had blamed her. But he did say someone pulled his hair and that he was not lying about it. By that point, she was really angry because she did feel like Tony was lying, so she screamed at him and said, "Stop lying, lying's not okay, nobody pulled your hair," and she just left them, turned around, and continued to cook breakfast. Seconds later, after she had turned around to continue to cook, all she heard was Tony calling her name. "Sasha, Sasha, Sasha." He did sound very, very scared, so she immediately turns around to see what is going on. She runs to the kitchen table where he was sitting ready to eat, and when she gets there, she sees where his hair was actually lifted, like if somebody was holding on to it. Now, she says that Tony's hair wasn't super long, but it was long enough to where you can tell that somebody was definitely pulling his hair. She could tell that something or someone was pulling on his hair, and he was barely able to hold himself up on that chair. And in the moment where she saw his head yank like really hard, she ran to him and caught him because he was about to land head first on the floor. She grabs Tony and they leave the house immediately. She calls her aunt and uncle and tells them to come home because something crazy is happening. When they get there, they explain in detail what happened to his parents, and for whatever reason, they didn't seem too surprised about what they had just told them. After this, she refused to go back into that house, and the aunt and uncle would then drop Tony off at her house. And they did end up getting a priest to go and bless the home where Tony and the parents were living in. Eventually, she did stop taking care of Tony, and they got somebody more permanent, and the aunt and uncle did tell her that things have calmed down and nothing was bothering Tony. However, Sasha's mom would go and visit them from time to time, and she did tell her that every time she would go, it just felt like something heavy was in there, especially when Tony would come around. She says that the weirdest thing was that this is only happening at his house because anytime Tony would come over to theirs, there wasn't any anything weird, anything heavy, like nobody was bothering him, so something's definitely going on with the house. But what do you guys think?
Story time about a man who lost everything, and it all started over one person that just didn't like him for some reason. I'm gonna go ahead and tell the story in the first person, but it did not happen to me. It actually happened to Carlos. I used to work at this company that from the very beginning I could tell that the hiring manager did not like me. Her name is Marissa. I honestly couldn't tell what her issue was with me at first, but from the very beginning she made it very clear that she just didn't like me. Despite that, I focused on my work and I became the most efficient salesperson in that whole company. I was even outdoing people that had been there for years. After a while, things began to change and a bunch of issues started to come up regarding me. This eventually led to an internal audit, and I ended up getting called to a meeting at Human Resources. When I walked into Human Resources, Marissa was already there waiting for me. During the meeting, she made statements that painted me in a very negative light. I wasn't even given the chance to defend myself, and before I knew it, I was terminated without any sort of severance. I ended up using the little savings that I had and started up my own car detailing company. Essentially, this car detailing company would operate on the go, offering services to your home and even to your workplace. At first, things were going extremely well. I was getting a ton of clients and business was good. Until one day, things started to go very wrong. I started having a lot of technical issues. A lot of people kept canceling their appointments with me. All of the issues that kept coming up made it really hard to continue the business, and I ended up having to completely sell everything. I sold off all my equipment, and I ended up having to move back in with my mom. While I was living with my mom, we had one of my aunts come visit. She was visiting from out of town. Now, this aunt has always been extremely spiritual. The moment she walked in, she took a look at me and told me that I looked like I had something extremely negative surrounding me, that she could sense it, and that somebody had done some heavy brujeria on me. She offered to perform a cleansing ritual. At this point, I felt like I didn't really have much to lose, so I agreed. Soon after, she got a bunch of her herbs together and she started doing prayers, and she prayed over me. I felt this immediate sense of relief, and it was almost like this heavy weight just came off of me. I can't even explain it. After the cleansing was done, my aunt did tell me that I would soon find out who had done this to me. Not long after that, things in my life started to improve, and I ended up finding a job very quickly, when before I was really struggling just to find a regular 9 to 5. Later on, I ended up reconnecting with some of my former co-workers from the job that I was terminated from. I found out that Marissa had been fired from that job after being found guilty of financial misconduct. I also found out that she was also diagnosed with some sort of health or heart condition that doesn't allow her to work. So she's stuck just living off of disability. Looking back, it was a very intense chapter of my life, and I still reflect on how everything unfolded and the way things eventually came full circle. It's always the people that you least expect that are always a problem.
What's the difference between a Wendigo and a skinwalker? Well, really, the big difference is that a skinwalker has this ability to shapeshift, whereas the Wendigo does not. Now, a Wendigo is sort of this person who is consumed by evil, and once he eats human flesh, he becomes sort of this monster. Now, it's a myth, it's a misconception that these things, look like a deer or have this skull-like face with horns. Actually, the real Wendigo from, the Algonquian tribes was more like this, zombie almost, with flesh sort of hanging off its skin. Now, the skinwalker, it's much different in that it's brought on by... Now, there are speculations. Now, some people, you ask them, they will say that is the witch themselves that transforms into this beast. Others will say that it is already the supernatural entity that exists, but it's called upon by a witch in Native American culture and sent after someone to do their dirty bidding. But it's said that it could take the form of any person, any kind of animal, any kind of object. So really, the main difference is one can shapeshift and one cannot, but they are both equally terrifying. This story takes place in Peoria, Illinois. Now, just outside of town, there was this husband and wife who were driving late one night, headed to work, and they happened to be going down this road that was just nothing but cornfields and sort of forest off in the distance. It was slightly snowing, and it was a really cold night. As they're making their way down this road, they begin to experience car trouble. So he veers off onto the shoulder, and eventually the car gives out. He gets out of the car, he pops the hood, and he goes around and starts seeing if he can figure out what was going on. As he's working on the car, he said he got this just eerie feeling, and his body just started to get the chills. And that's when he turned, and standing there were 3 teenagers. They were wearing these black hoodies with hoods up, and he said he could barely see their face. He said the one in the front says, "Could you give us a ride?" And he's like, obviously I can't give you a ride. My car's broke down. He said, "Go and try and start it." And he's like, okay. And he said the ones in the back, they were kind of like, go, chanting, kind of almost like telling him to go into the car. So he was a little freaked out, and he's like, okay, whatever, I'll give it a try. So he goes back in the car, gets in, turns the key in the ignition, boom, the car starts right up. And right as the car started up, he turns to the driver's side window, and there are these 3 teenagers. And he said the one was just kind of up against the window. And he rolls down his window and was like, "Hey, thanks, that worked. But look, I got my wife with me. It's the middle of the night. I don't know who you guys are. Like, I got my phone here. I'll call someone for you, but I can't give you a ride. I don't feel comfortable with that." They're like, "No, you have to give us a ride." And he's like, No, I told you, I'm not giving you a ride. And he said, "Just give us a ride. We can't come in unless you invite us." And he's like, "Yeah, I know, but I'm not inviting you." And he said that's when they're like, "I don't think you understand." And they got a little closer to the window, and that's when he could see they had these solid, dark, black eyes. And he could tell this wasn't an actual teenager, like this was something else. And he rolls up his window, and he starts panicking, like, what do we do? What do we do? These kids start getting angry, banging on the window, shaking the car, screaming. And this couple is just completely terrified. Thankfully, a car happens to come down the road and stop right next to him. At this point in time, these 3 teenagers are gone. This guy gets out of the truck and is like, "Hey, are you all right? Did you break down?" He's like, "Yeah, car broke down, but it started now. But there are these 3 teenagers out here, and they were like harassing me." So they start looking around, and in all directions, you could just see because it was cornfields. They were nowhere to be found. And this guy ended up following him all the way back into town. And he said for several weeks, he just kept having dreams about those eyes, which reminded him so much of like a rabbit's eye. You have to be careful when you buy stuff from the thrift store, because you don't know where those items have been, who owned them, what they were used for, and sometimes you can bring something home with you. Now, there was this girl named Rebecca. Rebecca was from Burbank, California. One day, she sees this thrift store, and she goes in the door, and over in the corner, she notices this beautiful old canopy bed. And instantly, she says, I have to have this bed. So she buys it, and she brings it home. Well, that night, she goes to bed in this new bed that she just bought. And as she's sleeping, she begins to have this dream. And in this dream, she sees this man in a flannel shirt and jeans and these boots and this big, thick, gray beard. And this man begins to grab her by the arms, and he begins to scratch her and basically thrash her against the bed. And eventually she wakes up terrified, and she feels pain. And when she goes to the mirror, she notices she has these bruises and scratches all over her body. Well, the next night, this happens again. And the next night, and the next night. And then one night, she's too terrified to go to sleep. She's worried she's going to have these nightmares. But all of a sudden, as she's laying in bed, she begins to be lifted off her bed. She's hovering about 3 feet over the top of this canopy bed. And something is lifting her up. She couldn't move, she couldn't talk. And this lasted for about 30 seconds. And then, plop, she falls onto the bed. And it was so loud that it wakes her daughter, who comes running in the bedroom. And is like, "What's wrong, Mom?" And she says, "Nothing, honey, just go back to bed." So this keeps happening night after night. And then she has to go out of town. So she asks her friend to watch her house. Her friend comes over, and she stays there for a couple days. Well, Rebecca decides to give her a call, ask her how things are going. And that's when her friend, starts crying on the phone. And Rebecca could tell that something was bothering her. So she goes, "What's wrong? Like, what's going on?" She goes, "Well, I slept in your bed." and I woke in the middle of the night to this old man standing at the foot of the bed. And I know he was there. I seen him, like, I'm freaked out. And when she describes this man, it is the exact man that Rebecca had seen in her dreams. So immediately she knew that something was wrong with this bed. So when she gets back from out of town, she takes the bed and she goes back to the thrift store. And she goes inside and she tells the manager, I don't want this bed. You can have it. Like, there's something wrong with it. And she said the manager just kind of looked at her and was like, you know, it's crazy that you brought this bed back, because not even a couple weeks ago, you know, before you bought this bed was brought back to us. We had sold it the first time. And the lady who bought it said that she didn't want it because there's something wrong with it. And so Rebecca's like, you know, well, how did you guys get this bed? She said, well, there was this estate of this old man who passed away, and this was his bed and one of the items that was given to the thrift store. And so immediately Rebecca felt like that must have been the old man that I was seeing in my dreams.
What would you do if your roommate started messing with the Ouija board and then slowly started seeming not like herself at night? This is After the Fire Stories, where I tell scary stories after the fire has gone out. So grab your favorite snack, your emotional support drink, and settle in, because today's story is about a girl whose roommate started messing with the Ouija board at night, and she should have just left it alone. I'm sending this because I still think about this girl all the time, and I still don't know what actually happened to her. I don't even know where she is now. We weren't lifelong best friends or anything, just housemates for a little over a year in our early 20s, but I knew her well enough to know when something changed. We rented a small house with one other girl from work. It was cheap and kind of crappy, but close enough to everything. And at first it was normal. My housemate, I'll call her Erin, was pretty outgoing. She had friends over a lot and always had music on, always wanted to talk at the end of the day, and she was one of those people who filled up a room. One weekend in October, she had a few friends over while I was home. They were drinking, being loud, doing all the usual stuff. And at some point, one of them brought out a Ouija board. I remember rolling my eyes because I thought it was corny and fake. They were all in the dining room with candles lit, acting serious for fun. And I told them I wanted no part of it and went to my room. I could still hear them laughing from down the hall. Later that night, after everybody left, Erin was weirdly quiet. Not upset exactly, just quiet. I asked if she was okay, and she said, yeah, just tired. I remember she looked pale, but I didn't think much of it because people get tired and hungover and weird all the time. The next few days, she was still pretty normal during the day, but not all the way. She seemed distracted. She'd stop in the middle of saying something and stare at nothing for a second, and she was sleeping badly too. I know because our rooms were across from each other and I'd hear her walking around late at night. Then one night I woke up and saw light under my bedroom door. I thought maybe she left the bathroom light on. When I opened my door, the hall was dark and the bathroom light was on, but her bedroom door was open just enough that I could see into the corner of her room. She was sitting on the floor in the dark, facing the wall, and not moving. I just stood there for a second, trying to understand what I was looking at. Then I heard her whispering, very low, very steady, like she was talking to someone close to her. I said her name and she didn't react at all. I shut my door fast and got back in bed and pulled the covers over my head, which I know sounds ridiculous, but I was so scared all at once that I didn't know what else to do. A few seconds later, I heard my bedroom door open. Then nothing. No footsteps, no voice, just that feeling that somebody was in the room. Then the door closed again. The next morning, she acted completely normal. I asked if she was okay, and she laughed and said, yes, why? I asked if she had been in my room last night, and she looked genuinely confused and said no. That happened more than once. Not every night, but often enough that I started dreading going to sleep. Sometimes I'd wake up and hear her whispering from her room, and sometimes I'd open my door and see her sitting in the same place, on the floor in the dark, facing the corner. Once she was kneeling instead. Once she was standing so close to the wall that her forehead looked like it was almost touching it. And every time I shut my door fast and got back in bed. And very often after that, I'd hear my own door open. Then it was silent, and then it would close. She started looking really bad too. Really thin, like scary thin, over a few months only. Her cheeks sank in and her skin looked almost kind of gray. She was tired all the time, but if you talked to her in the middle of the day, she seemed mostly like herself. She'd go to work, make jokes, watch TV with me, talk about regular stuff. That was almost the worst part because it made me keep doubting myself. I asked her one time straight up if anything weird had happened after the Ouija board, and she got very angry, way more angry than the question deserved. She said not to say that word in the house again. After that, I just stopped asking. The worst night was probably around 8 or 9 months into living there, and I woke up because I heard somebody in the hallway right outside my door. Not walking, just there. I could tell from the light under the door that something was blocking part of it. Then I heard Erin whispering from across the hall, which made no sense because if she was in her room, who was at my door? I stayed completely still, and then I heard her bedroom door creak. The whispering stopped, and a few seconds later, my bedroom door opened slowly and stayed open long enough for the hall air to hit my face. I could smell something too. It wasn't rotten exactly, it was damp and stale, like an old basement. Then the door closed. I didn't sleep at all after that. I moved out as soon as the lease was up, which was a little over a year after that first night with the board. Erin was still there when I left, still thin, still tired, still mostly normal in daylight, and still not right. She hugged me goodbye and told me I was lucky to be getting out of that house. I asked her what she meant, and she just said, it likes the rooms better when there are more people. That was the last real conversation I had with her. I checked her social media for a while after I moved, and then one day it all just stopped updating. Maybe she deleted it, maybe she moved, I don't really know. I still think about her sometimes, especially when I wake up at night and hear somebody talking in another apartment or outside in the hall. I always think of her sitting there in the dark facing the corner like somebody was in it with her. And I never touched a Ouija board after that. Yeah, absolutely not. If I found my roommate at night whispering to themselves in a corner in their room, I would have moved out much sooner than that. This has been After the Fire Stories. If you have a paranormal experience or a scary story to share with me, then go ahead and send it in and I might read yours next. What would you do if you picked up a stranger at a rest stop in the middle of the night and then down the road realized that there was something very wrong with him? This is After the Fire Stories, where I tell scary stories after the fire has gone out. So grab your favorite snack, your emotional support drink, and settle in because today's story is about a truck driver who saw something late at night that he still can't explain. I'm sending this because my wife keeps telling me I should stop telling this story at family things because nobody believes it anyway. But I know what happened and I know what I saw. I drove long haul for years, still do some, but just not the same routes as back then. This happened maybe 7 or 8 years ago, somewhere between Missouri and Kansas, one of those stretches where everything feels empty at night and the rest stops all start to look the same. I had pulled over around maybe 1 in the morning, not because I was done for the night, just to use the restroom, grab coffee, and walk around for a minute. It was cold out and pretty quiet. A couple trucks parked, one car, but not much else. When I came out of the building, there was a man standing near my truck. That already annoyed me because I don't like people standing near my truck when I don't know them. He looked middle-aged maybe, hard to tell exactly. He was thin, he had a dark jacket, he wasn't filthy or obviously homeless or anything like that. He just looked a little off. That was the feeling. He looked at me too directly right away. He asked if I was heading towards the next town over and said his ride had left him there and he just needed to get a little further up the road. Now, before anybody starts, yes, I know picking him up was stupid. I know that. I don't usually do that, but he looked normal enough in a general sense, and I think I felt bad for him because it was cold and late and dead out there. So I said, fine, just to the next town. He got in, and right away, I wish I hadn't. He didn't smell like alcohol or anything like that, but there was a strange smell to him. Kind of damp, kind of metallic. It's kind of hard to place. He also barely blinked. I noticed that maybe 10 minutes in. At first, he didn't talk much, just short answers, and then after a little while, he started asking weird questions. Not threatening exactly, just weird. Like, did I ever think about how many people die alone on roads at night? Did I think people know when they're about to die? What did I think happened right after? Did I think people stayed in their bodies for a while or left right away? I tried joking it off the first couple times because truckers hear odd conversations all the time. I told him I just drive the truck man. He didn't laugh. He just kept asking. Then he asked me if I thought a body knows it's empty when something else is using it. That is the exact question. By that point, I was fully uncomfortable. I remember gripping the wheel harder and kind of leaning away from him without meaning to. I looked over at him again after that, and that's when I saw his eyes. I know how this sounds. I know. They were black. Not his pupils were big, not shadows, not bad lighting. Black. The whole eye. And he was smiling at me. I jerked so hard I almost put the truck into the shoulder. I slammed on the brakes and came to a stop half on the road and half off because I didn't even care at that point. I just wanted him out. The second we stopped, he opened the passenger door and got out. He didn't argue. He didn't ask what I was doing. He didn't seem surprised. He just got out and started running. Not back toward the rest stop, not toward the road, not toward lights, not anywhere that made sense. Just off into the dark open land beside the highway, full speed. That part is what bothered me the longest, I think. Not even the eyes, just the way he ran straight out into nothing like he knew exactly where he was going. I sat there for maybe a full minute trying to decide if I had completely lost my mind. Then I drove. I didn't stop again until I got where I was going. I told my wife when I got home, and she believed that I believed it, if that makes sense. She could tell I was shaken up, but even she kind of thought maybe I was overtired and saw something wrong in some bad light. I would probably try to tell myself the same thing, if not for one thing. I had a cab camera running then. Not all the time, but most night drives. I pulled the footage the next day because I wanted to prove to myself I had not imagined the whole ride. But that entire section was corrupted. Not missing before he got in, not missing after I took off again, just that part. The video glitched, froze, came back, froze again, audio all chopped up. You could see me driving, you could hear bits of my voice once or twice, but there was no clean footage of him. I know what people think when I tell this, that I picked up a crazy guy, got spooked, and fill in the rest later. Maybe. I can't prove otherwise. I just know I have been doing night driving a long time, and I have never seen eyes look like that before or since. And I have never picked up another hitchhiker. This has been After the Fire Stories, and there's always another story to tell after the fire goes out. Good luck sleeping tonight. If you were the only person in your family seeing things at your grandma's house, how long would it take before you never wanted to go over there again? This is After the Fire Stories, where I tell scary stories after the fire has gone out, so grab your favorite snack, your emotional support drink, and settle in because today's story is about a girl who says that she saw things at her grandma's house that she can't explain. I'm sending this because I saw one of your other house stories and it reminded me of my grandma's place, which I still think about all the time even though she's been gone for years and the house was sold a long time ago. I hated going over there when I was little. That's the shortest version of it. Everybody loved that house except for me. My mom loved it because it was where she grew up. My grandma loved it because she had lived there forever. And my cousins loved it because there was a big yard and this long upstairs hallway that was fun to run through when all of us were there together. I was the only one who cried every time my parents said we were spending the afternoon there. Nobody ever really understood why, including me at first. The house itself wasn't creepy in an obvious way. It was clean and old, but clean. Little white house, front porch, lace curtains, the whole deal. If you saw it from the road, you would think it looked nice. It smelled like powder and coffee and old wood, and my grandma kept everything neat. There was nothing run down about it. But from the time I was maybe 5 or 6, I remember feeling watched in there. Not just once in a while either, the whole time. Especially in the back half of the house where the bedrooms were. If I had to walk down that little hallway alone to use the bathroom, I would run. My mom used to get annoyed with me for that and tell me to stop acting wild in the house. The first thing I ever actually saw there was in the dining room window. I was sitting at the table coloring while the adults were in the kitchen, and I looked up at the glass because I thought somebody had walked by outside, and I saw a woman standing in the reflection behind me. Not my mom, not my grandma, not anybody that I knew. And her hair looked dark and pinned up weirdly, like old-fashioned. I turned around right away, and there was nobody there. I remember telling my grandma somebody was in the dining room, and she said, "No, honey, everybody's in here." I didn't tell her what I really saw because I could already tell by her face she thought I was just being silly. After that, it kept happening. Not the same woman every time, just things. I would hear footsteps upstairs when nobody was upstairs. I would see somebody pass the end of the hall and then nobody would be there when I looked. Once I was in the bathroom washing my hands and I saw someone standing in the doorway in the mirror, but when I turned around, there was only the hall. The worst room in the house was the spare room. Nobody ever used it for anything except storing blankets and old clothes, but the door was always open and you had to pass it to get to the bathroom. I hated that room so much. I used to keep my eyes on the floor when I walked by because I was scared of seeing something in it. My mom thought I was being dramatic. My cousins made fun of me, and my grandma was the only one who ever kind of acted like maybe I wasn't making it all up. But even she never said that directly. One time when I was about 8, I was in the living room watching TV alone while everybody else was outside. I heard the spring on the spare bedroom bed creak, like somebody had sat down hard on it. Then I heard it again, and then again. I muted the TV and just sat there listening. It sounded exactly like someone getting up and sitting back down over and over. I went out to the porch and told my mom somebody was in the back room, and she got irritated and went to check because she probably thought one of my cousins had snuck in to scare me. But there was nobody there. I still remember how she looked at me after. Not angry exactly, just tired of hearing it. And the thing that finally made my grandma say something was when I was around 10. We were there for some holiday, maybe Easter, and all the adults were at the table after dinner. I had gone to the bathroom, and when I came back, I stopped in the kitchen doorway because I could see into the hall. There was a little boy standing in front of the spare bedroom. That's what it looked like to me. A little boy, maybe 7 or 8, with a pale shirt, dark pants, just standing there with his head turned toward that bedroom. I thought one of my cousins had come inside without me hearing, and I even started to say his name. Then the boy looked toward me, and I knew right away it wasn't one of my cousins. I don't know how to explain that part either. I screamed so loud everybody came running, and when they got to me, the hallway was empty. My grandma looked at my face and then looked down the hall herself for a long time, longer than everybody else did. And that night, when my mom was loading leftovers into the car, my grandma asked me very quietly, "Was it the little boy or the lady this time?" I just stared at her. I said, "You know about them?" And she said, "I know you see things in this house." And that is the most anybody ever admitted. I asked her who they were, and she wouldn't tell me. She just said some houses keep more than they should. After that, I still had to go over there, just less often because I was getting older and had more say in it. I started noticing a pattern too. Whatever was in that house wanted me to look at it. That was the feeling. If I ignored the hall or bedroom doors or the reflections in the windows, things stayed mostly quiet. If I looked too long, something would happen. The last time I ever saw anything there was when I was 16. I was staying over because my grandma had surgery and my mom wanted someone with her. I slept on the couch in the living room because there was no way I was using the spare room. Around 2 in the morning, I woke up and immediately knew I was not alone. The hallway light had been left on low, and from where I was on the couch, I could see straight down toward the back of the house. That little boy was standing in the hall again, only he wasn't little anymore, and I know that sounds insane, but he was taller than before, older maybe, with the same pale shirt and the same dark pants and the same wrong stillness. He was looking into the spare bedroom, not at me, and then very slowly he turned his head and looked right at me. And behind him, in the dark inside the spare bedroom, I could see the shape of a woman standing just inside the doorway. I pulled the blanket over my head and stayed like that until I heard my grandma wake up in her room. I never spent the night there again, and when she died a few years later, we were all helping clean out the house. I asked my mom if my grandma had ever talked about seeing anything there herself. My mom got quiet and said her mother used to say that there were certain rooms she didn't sit in after dark anymore. That's all she would tell me, and the house was sold after that. I have never driven by it, and I still don't know why I was the only one who ever really saw things. Maybe I wasn't. Maybe I was just the only one who kept admitting it. Yeah, no, being the only one in your family seeing people in the hallway and then your grandma asking you if it was a lady or the little boy, that would be too much for me. This has been After the Fire Stories. If you have a scary story, a paranormal experience, or something that you can't explain, then go ahead and send it in to me and I might read yours next. What would you do if you and your friends broke into an abandoned house and each time one of you came back different? This is Scared with Jess, and today's story is about a group of teenagers that broke into a house and wished that they never kept coming back. I'm not proud of any of this. That's probably the first thing I should say. This is when I was 17. There was an abandoned house outside that town that everybody knew about. Not famous, not some big urban legend place, just one of those half-rotted houses on old land that teenagers messed with because there was nothing else to do. We called it the Turner Place because apparently that was the family name years ago, and I don't know if that was even true. The first time we went, there was 4 of us. It was daytime, and we walked through, looked around, and made jokes, found some old magazines, broke furniture, all of that. The place felt creepy, but in a normal abandoned house way. Mold, old wallpaper, animal smells, floor sagging. And then one of my friends found the back room upstairs. There wasn't anything special about that room at first glance. Just smaller than the others. One little window, stains all over the floor. But on one wall, there was these marks cut into the wood. Not graffiti, not names, repeated shapes. Same symbol over and over. Carved deep enough that you would feel them with your fingers. My friend Evan touched one and immediately pulled his hand back and said it felt warm. We laughed at him, and that night, Evan called me around 2 a.m. asking if I was outside his house. I wasn't. He said somebody had been walking in circles under his window for 20 minutes, and every time he looked, there was no one there. I told him to stop freaking himself out and go to sleep. That should have been the end of it. Instead, we went back again. That was the mistake. Evan wanted to prove to himself that it was nothing. The rest of us went because we were dumb and 17 and still thought scary things were fun if they happened to somebody else. We went back at dusk this time, not full dark, but getting there. Right away, the house felt different, quieter, heavy. Even one of the guys who never took anything seriously said it felt harder to breathe in there. We went upstairs again because of course we did. The back room door was shut this time. I know it was open the first time because we all walked right past it and looked in. This time it was shut, and there was something black smeared across the doorknob. It looked like old grease maybe, or mud. Evan was the one who opened it. The room smelled awful, like something dead, but underneath that there was another smell, almost sweet. We all noticed that, and one of the guys gagged right away. On the floor, right in the center of the room, there was a dead dog. Not fresh, not bones either, somewhere in between. And around it, in the same black stuff, were the same symbols from the wall drawn in a circle. We all started backing up at once. Then, from downstairs, we heard a door slam. Not a little noise, a full, violent slam. We ran. On the way out, Evan tripped at the bottom of the stairs and hit his shoulder hard on the wall. I grabbed his arm and pulled him up. We made it outside the back to the truck and got out of there. After that, Evan changed. I don't know how else to say it. He got quiet first, then mean. Not all the time, just in these little bursts that didn't fit him. He stopped sleeping. He looked bad within maybe 2 weeks. Not sick exactly, just worn out and wrong. Like he was always coming back from somewhere hard, even when he'd been sitting in class all day. Then he started scratching those symbols into things. His desk at school, the paint on his truck, the inside of his own closet door. He swore he wasn't doing it, said he'd noticed them after sleeping or after zoning out and have no memory of it. His mom thought he was on drugs. He wasn't. And one night, he showed up at my window around 1 a.m. I'm not exaggerating. I woke up because I heard something tapping on the glass, and it was him standing there in the dark. I opened the window a crack and asked what he was doing. He said, "Don't let it in if it asks in my voice." Then he walked away. The next day at school, he acted like he didn't remember coming over. At that point, I wanted nothing to do with him or that house anymore, but the thing is, you can tell yourself you're done with something and still get pulled back. A week later, one of the other guys said Evan had gone back out there by himself and maybe we should go get him before he did something stupid. So we went. It was fully dark this time. The front door of the house was open, and we all know it had been shut because one of us had checked from the truck with the headlights on. The air around that place felt colder than the road by a lot. Not just country night cold, different. We could hear somebody upstairs, walking, then talking. It sounded like Evan, but not fully, like his voice had dropped lower and was rubbing against itself. I know that's a weird way to put it, but that's what it sounded like. We went upstairs because we were stupid enough to think we could still fix whatever was happening. The back room door was open. Evan was in there, kneeling in the middle of the floor where the dog had been before, except the dog was gone, just stains left. He was facing the wall with the symbols and talking fast in a voice that was way too deep for him. I couldn't understand most of it, but I heard my name once. Then one of the other guys' names. I said, "Evan?" And he stopped. He turned and slowly he smiled at us. That smile still bothers me because it was him, but not right. Too wide, too calm. Then he stood up and I realized he had blood all over his hands. One of the guys bolted immediately. The other one just froze. I should have run then too, but I didn't, not until Evan started walking toward us and said in that same deep voice, "You left me here with it." We ran after that. I heard him coming behind us on the stairs for a second and then not anymore. We got outside and into the truck and then left him there. I know that sounds horrible. It was horrible, but none of us could make ourselves go back. His mom reported him missing the next day. They found him 2 days later walking on the shoulder of the highway 20 miles away with no shoes on. He was dehydrated and half out of his mind. He was alive, but after that he was never really the same. He ended up leaving town within the year to stay with relatives, and after a while none of us knew where he even was. The house burned down maybe 6 months later. People say squatters or kids or wiring or whatever. Maybe. I don't care. I still dream about that room sometimes. And every now and then, maybe once a year, I'll wake up and find one of those carved symbols in my head so clearly that I can draw it from memory without trying. Follow for more scary stories, and as always, good luck sleeping tonight.
And I saw these like ditches and I thought it was like a river ditch, and then I almost fell in it.
When I saw this video, I immediately thought of Brandon Swanson, because Brandon Swanson disappeared without a trace while on the phone with his parents, and one of the leading theories about his disappearance is that he fell into a sinkhole. It was shortly after midnight on May 14th, 2008, when Brandon drove his car into a ditch on his way home from a small gathering at a fellow college student's house. Brandon was uninjured after crashing his car, so he got out and placed a call to his parents just before 2 a.m. While on the phone, he explains his
the situation to his father, who in turn tells him to stay where he is so that he can drive out and locate him. Now, at the time, Brandon believed that he was outside of the small town of Lind, and while talking to his dad, he said he could see the town's lights up ahead. As his parents headed out to find him, Brandon began flashing his brights to signal them to his location, and his parents did the same, but neither of them saw anything at all. Brandon stayed on the phone with his parents the entire time, but after a while, he started to get frustrated that his parents couldn't find him. So he decided that he was going to start walking towards the lights that he believed were coming from the downtown area of Lind. While walking, he continued to stay on the phone with his parents, but after 47 minutes into the call, Brandon interrupted their conversation saying, "Oh shit," and the line went dead. Brandon's dad attempted to call his phone back multiple times, but had no luck. Brandon was no longer answering. The drive from the home where the party was to his parents' home where Brandon was heading when he crashed should have only taken about 30 minutes. He left that home around midnight, but placed the call to his parents 2 hours later, stating that he was stuck in the ditch. Now, we don't know what Brandon was doing during that almost 2-hour window, but it's speculated that he may have just been trying to get himself out of the ditch before finally giving up and calling for help. Brandon was reported missing the next morning. When pulling up his cell phone records, it showed that he had actually been 25 miles in a different direction from where he thought he was. And it was this information that led to the discovery of his car. Although there was no damage done to his vehicle, 2 of the wheels weren't even touching the ground. Nothing unusual was found at the site, but the grass was so high in this area that investigators were unable to see which direction his footprints went off in. So they brought in search and rescue dogs who led them to a wooded area near a riverbank. The river was searched extensively, but they never found anything. They even set up these gates so that in the case that Brandon's remains or any of his belongings were in the river, they would get caught up in these nets while going downstream, but there was still nothing. And to this day, the whereabouts of Brandon Swanson is still a mystery. If the trail the dogs were following was in fact where Brandon went, he walked through a field instead of walking alongside the road. So despite nothing being found during the search, some theorize that he fell into the river before his phone went dead, or that he may have fallen into a sinkhole while walking across the field, similar to what we saw in the first video.
Do you believe that there is something hidden behind these hills and mountains? I'm sure you guys have seen the movie The Hills Have Eyes, but if you haven't, it's about a family who is on a road trip. They get sent to go a different route, and all hell breaks loose. There are cannibals hiding within these hills. 2 weeks ago, my family and I took a road trip to Colorado, and this is actually in New Mexico. And I thought the view was beautiful. This is the picture that I took. And then it made me think, do you guys think that there are things hiding behind within these hills? This is another photo that I took. This is in Colorado in Estes Park. We are going into the town, but those are the Rocky Mountains back there. Do you think that there are any signs of life hiding within these mountains? I'm not sure if you guys have heard about the term that the woods can talk, the mountains talk, but there's also a saying that they also hold a lot of secrets. Also, peep my really cute red rum wine glass. Visiting such a secluded place like this made me think, as we're driving literally through the Rocky Mountains, I'm like, what is behind here? Maybe I'm a little bit dramatic, maybe I love the drama and the sass, but I'm sorry, you're not going to tell me that there is absolutely nothing hiding, listening, talking. And let's just think about the crimes that happen in places like this. They're so hidden, they are so secluded. What about spirits? What about paranormal? What about ghosts? Looking at this photo, you see beauty, you see nature, you see mountains covered in snow. It's beautiful. But what lies beneath? Like, this is clearly beautiful, but just look at it, feel it. Is it not giving The Hills Have Eyes?
Get ready with me while I tell you guys this ghost story. This story was sent into my email, and if you have any ghost stories, paranormal experiences, or scary stories that you want to share, you can send them to the email in my bio. I was about 10 years old when something happened to me that I still can't explain. And even now, 6 years later, I can still remember it with perfect clarity. At the time, my life was already unstable. We were constantly moving from place to place, never really staying anywhere long enough for it to feel like home. But there was one house in particular in Post Falls, Idaho, that I will never forget. Does Idaho have like a creepy background. Is there a creepy background to Idaho? It was isolated, surrounded by open fields that stretched out for miles in every direction. At night, there wasn't much out there except darkness and silence. A kind of silence that feels too big, like it's listening. One evening, we had just come home from my grandparents' house. It was late, and I remember this part so clearly because of how sudden it was. As we pulled into the driveway, I felt it. There was a heaviness in my chest. It wasn't like pain, more like pressure. Like something in the air had just shifted the exact moment we arrived. It felt like we were being watched. I remember turning my head slowly toward the windows of the car, scanning the dark yard outside, and nothing. There was no movement, there were no figures, just the field, stretching endlessly into the night. I told myself it had to be nothing, just my imagination, just me being tired. So I got out of the car, and the house was quiet, except for the usual nighttime sounds, small creaks, distant wind moving through the grass. And as I walked towards the front door, I saw something. Imagine you're coming home, right? To what's supposed to be a comfort, your sanctuary, somewhere where you can just be yourself, you can relax, you can just be comfortable. And the vibe is off the minute you get into the driveway. The vibe's off. To top it off, then you see something. Oh, hell no. Just for a split second, out of the corner of my eye, I froze and I turned my head immediately, but there was nothing there. Empty yard, empty air, nothing was out of place. I stood there for a moment, trying to understand what I had just seen, and I almost convinced myself that it was probably just an animal. A stray dog, maybe, a cat. We had plenty of those wandering around the fields at night, so I let it go, and I went inside. Never let it go. Never let it go. Once you convince yourself you did not see what you know you saw, that's when things start to go wrong, okay? That's when things start to go wrong. And for a while, everything felt normal again. But that feeling from earlier had never fully gone away. By around 9:30 or 10 o'clock, everyone was getting ready for bed, and the house had gone quiet in a way that it only does when a long day finally ends. The lights were dimmed, the doors were closed, and the exhaustion was finally settling in. I remember standing near my room, getting ready to go to sleep, and then I saw it again. I told you. What did I say? Out of the corner of my eye, but this time it wasn't outside. It was inside the house. Run, okay? You need to be running as fast as you've ever run in your entire life. I'm talking, you know what I mean? Leave all of your belongings behind, fire drill style. Just go, 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 go. It was inside, in my brother's room, which was directly across from mine. Okay, so if your brother's room was on a different level of the house, would you care as much? Not my problem. At first, I told myself that I was imagining it again. That same trick of the eye, the same paranoia from earlier. But something made me stop. Something made me turn slowly, very, very slowly, towards my brother's doorway, and that's when I saw it. A tall figure, completely black, standing inside the room like it had always belonged there. It was wearing what looked like a top hat. Not modern, not normal, something old and out of place. The room was dimly lit from a small amount of light coming in, but not enough to make out any real facial features. But there was a face. At least I think there was. Why are we looking at this thing long enough to try and figure out if it has a face? I couldn't focus on it. It was like my mind refused to process it directly. Like looking at it too long made it harder to understand, not easier. And then it noticed me. Oh no. Or maybe I just noticed that it was aware of me, but suddenly everything in my body changed. The air felt heavier, my chest tightened again, just like it had in the driveway. I screamed, loud enough that the entire house snapped awake. My mom came running immediately, asking what was wrong, trying to calm me down. I was shaking and trying to explain it through my tears and panic. There's a man in my brother's room, but when she went to look, there was nothing there. Of course there wasn't. Of course there wasn't. No one. No movement. Just an empty room. She told me I must have been dreaming or imagining things, that I was overtired, but I knew what I saw. And what makes it worse is that wasn't the last time. What do you mean? Because after that night, I started seeing things again. Not always clearly, not always fully, just edges. In the corners of rooms, shadows where there shouldn't have been shadows. And sometimes that same feeling in my chest, like something was standing just out of view, waiting for me to look again.
Might have known the story of real-life boogeyman.
I worked a night shift at a care home, and something from the abbey tried to take me. I've never known how to explain this properly, but it's stuck with me for years. When I was 18, I worked night shifts at a care home that was in the UK. The place was pretty isolated, just a few dim streetlights, that was about it. Not far from us was like this massive, abandoned Gothic abbey. It had been empty for at least 10 years, at least that was what we were told. From my very first shift, something just felt really off. The four of us could all feel it. The air was heavy, almost kind of suffocating. At one point I actually went to the bathroom and I just started crying. No reason, just the feeling of pure dread. It almost felt like we were being watched. That night was too quiet. There was no residents calling in, no movement, everything was just so silent. Then exactly 3:20 a.m. hit and there's this loud banging on the windows, on the doors. We looked outside and there was this woman and it looked like she was covered in red paint. It was all over her hands, her arms, her legs. She was just standing there. We were trying to talk to her while somebody dialed 999. And that's about when she started to speak. And she was very calm, too calm. And she mentioned that she just came from the abbey. She looked straight at me and she smiled. It wasn't human. It was not normal at all. And then she told me, they're looking for girls exactly like you. And then she leaned in a little closer and she said, come with me. We all looked toward the abbey and I swear there were lights inside, flickering almost like candles were lit. She just kept repeating, it won't hurt, and then she would laugh and then she ran. I don't know how to explain this part, but everything in my body felt like it wanted to follow her. Like it was so intense, one of my people had to literally grab my arm to keep me from following her. 10 minutes later, police arrived and she was completely gone. CCTV showed up. They also never found her. She was literally just gone from everywhere. And even the army came in. They wound up taping off the abbey and searched inside. They found candles lit on the inside and they found a red symbol on the floor with no explanation. They just kept asking us the same thing over and over. Did she touch you? And after that night, everything seemed to have gotten worse. 2 coworkers wound up hospitalized, one in a mental unit for years. And me, I've had nightmares every single night, and in my nightmares, I follow her. She leads me back to the abbey, and the closer I get, the more I can see shapes standing in the dark, waiting. I still don't know what happened that night, but what I think is in that abbey, it was never actually empty. In reality, I'm scared. I don't want to tell my family or friends what happened because I don't want them to judge me or in case they don't believe me. But I really just need some kind of explanation of what that was that night.
If you were in the woods that night and saw something that you weren't supposed to see, would you even know when to run? This is After the Fire Stories, where I tell scary stories after the fire has gone out, so grab your favorite snack, your emotional support drink, and settle in because today's story is about a group of boys that saw something in the woods that night that they still don't really talk about. I don't really tell this story because most people either laugh or start asking a bunch of questions that I can't answer. I'm 34 now, and it happened when I was probably 16, maybe 17. Me and my friends used to walk around the woods at night because we were bored and stupid and thought maybe it was fun if something happened to us after midnight. There was 4 of us that night, and we went out behind this old service road where people used to dump trash and drink. Nothing out there besides trees, mud, and a few trails people made over the years. At first, it was normal. We were just messing around and talking and throwing rocks, acting like idiots. Then we saw light farther in. Not flashlight light, more orange, like a fire. One of us thought maybe older kids were out there drinking and we should have left right then. But of course we didn't. The closer we got, the quieter it got. That's the first thing I remember. We could still hear ourselves stepping in the leaves, but the woods didn't sound normal anymore. No bugs, no frogs, silence. Then we smelled something bad. Not exactly rotten, more like blood and smoke together. It's really hard for me to explain. We got close enough to see people through the trees, and there were at least 5 or maybe 6, all wearing dark clothes, standing around this low fire in a clearing. Nobody was talking loud. If they were saying anything, it was low. I remember one of my friends grabbing my arm because he saw it at the same time I did. There was something hanging from a branch over the fire. At first I thought it was a deer because people hunted out there sometimes. Then I saw how small it was. I'm not going to get graphic, but it was an animal and it had been cut open. There were other things on the ground too, jars maybe, and what looked like lines or symbols made in something dark around the fire pit. One of the people stepped sideways and the fire hit his face, or part of it, and he had something smeared all over him. Maybe it was paint, maybe not, I don't really know. We all dropped down at the same time without even saying it. I thought maybe we could back out slow and leave, and then one of the people in the clearing said very clearly, "They're here." Not shouted, they just said it plainly. Everything in me went cold. Nobody should have known we were there. We had not said one word since seeing the fire, and then all of them turned towards the trees at once. I still think about that part because it didn't look normal. It was too quick and exact, like they had all gotten the same signal at the exact same time. We ran. That part's simple. We just ran, branches in the face, slipping, grabbing at trees, full panic. I could hear my friends crashing through the woods around me, and I could hear people behind us too, but not in a normal chasing way. More like bursts of movement and then silence and then movement again from a different direction. At one point, I looked over my shoulder and I saw one of them between the trees way closer than he should have been, and I don't know how he got there that fast. We made it back to the road and didn't stop until we got to my friend's truck. Nobody talked for a full minute after we got in. We were all breathing so hard, I thought I was going to throw up. The weirdest part was my friend Tyler. He was sitting in the back seat and not saying anything, just staring at his lap. We kept asking if he was okay, and he wouldn't answer. Finally, he held up his hand and there was blood on it. Not a lot, just smeared across his fingers. We thought maybe he was hurt, but he wasn't. Then he turned his flashlight on his jeans and there was a handprint on his knee. A full handprint. None of us had touched him like that. We were too busy running for our own lives. We all agreed not to tell anybody the real version because how do you ever explain that without sounding crazy or getting in trouble for being out there in the first place? We told our parents we got spooked by hunters and then we just came home early. Tyler burned those jeans the next day. For maybe 2 weeks after, all of us kept getting calls from unknown numbers where nobody would talk. You'd answer and just hear breathing for a second and then it would hang up. That could have been some local idiots messing with us, I know that. But it happened to all 4 of us, and we had not told anybody what we saw. Tyler got the worst of it. He started sleeping with his lights on, and he swore somebody was standing outside his house at night. His mom made him see a counselor after a while because he stopped wanting to leave the house after dark. We all split up after graduation and barely talk now. I saw one of the other guys maybe 5 years ago at a gas station, and the only thing he said about that night was, "I still don't go in the woods." Yeah, absolutely not. As soon as somebody says they're here in the clearing when they shouldn't even know that they're there at all, I'd be gone. This has been After the Fire Stories. If you have a scary story or paranormal experience or something you just can't explain, then go ahead and send it in to me, and I might read yours next.
Hey y'all, I'm back with another spooky story time. So there's this girl that watches my videos. Her name is Sarah. Thank you for watching them. But she requested me to tell one of her spooky, scary stories. Sarah is the second oldest of 4 kids. So there's 3 girls, 1 boy. The boy is the youngest, right? And, you know, she has a happy family. She has a mom and a dad both present in her life. And they have this big, beautiful home in Westchester, New York. And the house is pretty old, you know. It was built in like the 1800s. There's like 4 bedrooms. So 2 of them have to share a room. Not Sarah's older sister and not Sarah. But the 2 youngest ones have to share a room. The mom and dad obviously have their room. So it was fairly new when they moved into this house. They moved there back in like the summer of 2023. And apparently they knew that there was like weird stuff that happened in this house with the previous owners before they even moved in. So they basically agreed to moving in a house that they knew was haunted. So there was like news articles that like there was a murder that happened in this house or whatever. This is all what she is telling me, okay? So I'm just sharing her story. She's like, yeah, there's a news article about the murder that happened there. Basically, this father killed his 2 daughters there. And she didn't give like the name of the house, like the address or anything like that. But I don't recall what year that the murder happened. I just know it was like nowhere near when they moved in 2023. Move into the house, right? And they noticed that like there's still toys in like the basement of the house. There's no like evidence that people lived there before, like they cleared the house out, but there's still like little toys in the basement, and it looks like, you know, it's toys for like a female. In the midst of them, you know, checking the house out the first night that they moved in, they hear the toys like moving and stuff in the basement because they didn't have a door to the basement door. So anytime you was upstairs, you can hear what is going on downstairs pretty loudly. So it sounded like somebody was like clashing the toys, making it known that they were playing with the toys. So Sarah and her older sister heard it, but they were like, okay, maybe we just are like spooked out because we already know what is bound to happen with this house. That's the first day. Couple days go by, everything is pretty chill, you know, but it's a morning where there was no school, so I'm assuming it was like a Saturday or a Sunday. She mentions that her mom was making like breakfast for everybody, and they had a little family table that they would eat breakfast at. So everybody's sitting around, you know, the table waiting for mom to finish cooking breakfast. The mom is on the stove cooking eggs and bacon and stuff. They all notice at the same exact time that the fridge opens up slowly but surely. And the reason it freaked them out was because even though it was the morning time, they didn't have like any lights on or anything like that. Only light they had on was like the kitchen light, but other than that, nothing else was on. So it pretty much spooked them out. The mom seen it. She like closed the fridge and she was just like, that's weird, but we're gonna enjoy our breakfast. So later on that day, like I said, this is fairly new into them moving into this house. So them seeing these weird encounters happening already is like mind-blowing. But it's like they already moved there. They're not gonna move out or anything like that because they already knew. So later on that day, now they're trying to get ready to go to bed. And while they're trying to go to bed, everybody is taking showers before they go to bed. But nobody at this time hopped in the shower yet. They hear the shower on. Sarah and her older sister once again hear the shower on. Both have different rooms, but everybody in the house has to share one bathroom. So Sarah and her older sister are like fighting to get in the shower. Who's going to get in the shower first? And they hear the shower on thinking that it's their mom or their dad because they know that their 2 younger siblings are in the room watching TV. They're not really ready to take a shower yet or whatever. And Sarah goes in the room to see her mom sitting on the bed getting ready to take a shower. She's like, okay, that's not mom. And Sarah's older sister goes down in the kitchen to see that her dad is on his computer doing some work and eating. So they're like, who the hell is in the shower? Decide they're gonna go in the bathroom at the same time to see who is in the bathroom because they already knew this next part. They go in the bathroom and they hear and see that the water is on, but the light is off and there's no clothes or no towels in there. So basically the shower is just running. So they proceed to ask everybody else in the house, did you guys turn the water on? Was anybody about to hop in the shower? Everybody's like, no, we thought one of y'all was going to go in the shower first, because they were arguing about who's going to go in the shower first. They were like, well, that's pretty weird. But Sarah ended up taking a shower before her older sister. She said that there's really a lot of more like encounters that happened in this house. But if you guys want to hear more stories from Sarah, comment down below and I'll share them. And make sure you guys are following me, because why not?
The last time that he was ever seen alive, he was sprinting into the woods while filming a documentary with a crew of 12 people. That was 8 years ago, and to this day, nobody can explain what really happened to him or where he went. This is the mysterious disappearance of Terrence Woods Jr. Nothing disturbs me more than when someone vanishes into thin air, which is what happened here. Yet somehow he was surrounded by 12 other people and still managed to leave behind 0 clues. If you want to lose sleep tonight, stick around and let's talk about it. This is Terrence Woods Jr. He was only 27 years old when he suddenly and very mysteriously disappeared in 2018. Terrence grew up in Maryland and he was super close with his family, especially his dad, who he was named after. Growing up, he loved to tell stories and to travel, so eventually he attended the University of Maryland, where he majored in broadcast journalism. His absolute dream was to work in London, so once he earned his bachelor's degree in 2013, that's the first place he headed. During his time in London, he earned his master's degree in international relations. So not only was Terrence super smart, he was also super driven and accomplished every single goal that he had for himself. He then began his career in the TV and film industry, and he started working as a freelance production assistant for some pretty high-profile shows like The Voice UK. All of his peers and every single company that he ever worked for described him as exceptional. They said he was ahead of the curve, super reliable, very talented, and was overall just a huge asset to every team that he worked with. While he was in London, he worked for a UK production company called Raw TV, and he was really enjoying his time there. The only complaint that he had was that he somehow broke his pelvis while he was there, but other than that, and once that healed, he loved it. In July of 2018, Terrence went back home to Maryland to be closer with his family and to start a new chapter of his life. And within a few weeks of being home, Raw TV contacted him about a potential job offer in the States. Like I said, they had worked together while abroad, and Terrence was super reliable, so they offered him a job to work on an upcoming Discovery documentary called Gold Rush, which was going to be filmed in the remote Idaho mountains. Terrence very excitedly said yes, and in September of 2018, he packed up all of his belongings and got ready to fly out. He hugged his dad and said, "See you later," in which his dad lovingly said, "See you sooner." But little did he know that Terrence would never be coming home. In fact, this would be the very last time that he would ever see him alive again. Just 5 days later, now October 4th, 2018, Terrence called his dad just to check in. He finally made it to Elk City, Idaho, and was winding down for the night, as the next day they would begin filming in the remote mountains of Ora Grande, Idaho. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary, and Terrence actually seemed excited to get started. But he did tell his dad that he was actually going to be leaving his job 5 weeks earlier than expected and coming home, but that everything was okay. He had already changed his flight to October 10th, so it was set in stone that he would be coming home. But the next day, Terrence vanished, and the circumstances surrounding his disappearance have never been explained. So on October 5th, 2018, at around 6:41 p.m., one of the 12 crew members that were out in the mountains that day called the Idaho County Sheriff's Office to report a missing person. The missing person was Terrence, and this crew member's description of what happened is very odd. His name was Simon G, and he was one of the producers for Raw TV. He told the dispatcher that he and his crew had just wrapped filming for the day when Terrence said that he needed to go to the bathroom. But according to Simon, Terrence suddenly took off sprinting down a steep slope near the Penman mine. He was then seen by 2 other crew members walking toward the edge of a cliff, where he then jumped off a 10-foot drop. They said he landed on his feet, completely uninjured, and continued sprinting deep into the woods and out of sight. Simon told police that Terrence took off running like a hare, and when asked what he meant by that, he said that Terrence was running literally so fast that no one could ever catch up to him. But he did say that this was really weird to see because, according to him, although Terrence was running super fast, he didn't miss a step or stumble at all, and it seemed like he knew exactly where he was running to. to. Another crew member chimed in and said that Terrence's clothes were ripped and bloody, but this has never been confirmed. It was weird though, because Simon told the 911 dispatcher kind of like this huge backstory into what was happening that day, rather than Terrence going missing. Like, he told the dispatcher that Terrence was having a difficult day emotionally and had never been in the woods before, which is not true. The crew said that Terrence must be having a mental breakdown, and not only will he not respond to officers, but that he actually just doesn't want to be found. The Raw TV crew then proceeded to say that Terrence actually had an anxiety attack earlier in the day that required them to detain him, which was also odd because they continued letting him work. They didn't try to get him any medical attention or even document that Terrence experienced any such issue. You'd think that if it was something that serious that they had to detain him, that something would have been written down for legal reasons. So the crew said they tried catching up to Terrence after he took off running, but they couldn't, and then he vanished. Since it was already so late in the day when they called the police, they didn't actually come out to the scene until the next morning, which is kind of sad because, as we all know, those first few hours after someone goes missing are so critical and important. But given the circumstances, a massive search was then launched, which involved tracking dogs, helicopters, volunteers, ATVs, and authorities even used infrared equipment to scan the rugged terrain where he went missing. But the creepiest part is that they found absolutely no trace of him. And when I say nothing, I mean nothing. No clothing, no blood, no personal belongings, not even any footprints where the crew said he supposedly ran through. Just nothing. This is weird to me because one of the crew members said that as Terrence was running away, his clothes were ripped and bloody, yet no shreds of clothing were found or any of his blood. So that definitely sticks out to me as suspicious. Even the tracking dogs found nothing. They didn't pick up on a scent or trail at all anywhere on that mountain, let alone where he supposedly ran to. There was absolutely no evidence found that he was ever on that mountain or in that specific area. Since this was October in the remote Idaho mountains, the weather was super cold and it was raining, which also made the search more difficult. But sadly, nothing was ever found, and the search for Terrence was called off after only a week. By the time Terrence's dad arrived on the scene after being notified that his son was missing, most of the Raw TV production crew had left Idaho and gone home, and the rest followed a week later once the search was officially called off. According to Terrence's family, none of them helped search for him or supported his family in any way. They just dipped. They also never revealed the full names of all of the crew members who were on site that day, which is super frustrating for the family because they were literally the last ones to see Terrence alive. But right off the bat, this case was not handled as carefully as it should have been, and some would even say that it was botched. For starters, all of the crew member stories seem to change, a few different times at that. I mean, from where he was last located to whether or not someone was chasing him, to how far Terrence ran that day, all the way down to how long it took for them to notify police that he was missing. Their claims of this breakdown that he was having just didn't seem to add up. Before he went missing, even Raw TV said that Terrence was always calm under pressure and super reliable. His peers and other people in the TV and film industry recommended him several times because he was super smart and very valuable to their team. But the second he went missing, Raw TV started painting him in a completely different light. They suddenly portrayed him as the super unstable and confused guy who was unable to understand simple equipment requests. Then they said that he had an anxiety attack to the point that they had to restrain him. Yet they continued letting him work that day and never tried getting him any medical help, or at the very least, physically document somewhere that he had an incident that day. That just seems weird to me and super unlikely that they wouldn't do any of those things. Terrence had no history of any mental illness and he never struggled with anxiety attacks before. And in the days leading up to his disappearance, there wasn't a single incident of any unusual behavior at all. He even talked to his dad on the phone the night before he vanished, and everything seemed totally fine. So because of that, his dad has a hard time believing Raw TV and their claims that all of a sudden something went wrong with Terrence. His dad said it seemed like the company was more focused on his work ethic rather than his disappearance, which was odd. A lot of people also disagree or don't really believe the crew's version of events that day. They said that he took off sprinting and jumped off of a 10-foot cliff, landed directly on both of his feet, completely uninjured, and then kept running. This is widely disputed, mainly because of two things. One is that Terrence was flat-footed, so he didn't have the best balance and would even trip just going up the stairs sometimes. So to think that he somehow jumped off this 10-foot cliff and landed perfectly on his feet and didn't get hurt just seems so unrealistic. But the second reason this is disputed is because, like I said at the beginning, when Terrence was in London right before this, he broke his pelvis somehow. So now the scenario of him jumping off the cliff at full speed seems even more unrealistic and like it just didn't happen. Of course, we can't prove this, as none of us were there other than the crew members, and Terrence isn't here to tell his side of the story. Terrence's dad doesn't believe that his son would willingly do this, unless he was scared to death of something, or he was being chased. Because Terrence was a safe person too. I mean, before London, he also traveled and worked in Egypt and Turkey, so he was well aware of paying attention to his surroundings and making smart choices when it comes to being in places he wasn't overly familiar with. Now let's talk about what the police didn't do, reportedly. It's been reported that they didn't initially search Terrence's motel room, let alone treat it as a possible crime scene. Idaho police only found one bag that belonged to him, and missing from it were literally all of his clothes. So outside of the clothes that he was wearing when he went missing, literally all of it was gone. He'd been there for a few days, so to not find even any of his pajamas or anything like that, that's weird. The only item police found in his bag was a single pair of dress shoes that were covered in mud and then wrapped in a plastic bag. The dress clothes that went with them, like his suit, were also missing as well. So where did all of his clothes go? That's something that has never been explained. As far as I can find, there weren't any requests to pull his cell phone records or cell phone pings to see where he went or was last known to be. And on top of this, it's been reported that Penman Mine, the last place his crew members saw him running towards, was never searched either. How true that is, I'm not sure, because you think that it would be searched given that was the last place that he was seen. But this area is super rugged and dense, so maybe it was unsafe to enter and search. I'm not sure, but that could be a reason if it wasn't. Locals say that people disappear in these woods all the time, and they actually advise against people going in this specific area. It's just weird that he was surrounded by 12 other production crew members and somehow still vanished. Literally in the middle of filming a documentary. I guess this specific area is littered with old mine shafts that disappear straight into the ground. So I guess it's possible that he fell into one. But the last time that Terrence was ever physically seen alive by anyone outside of the film crew was the night before he disappeared. They were all out at dinner at a local restaurant, which was confirmed. And a crew member said that he actually met a young woman at this dinner. But no one has ever come forward claiming to be this woman, and she has never been identified. So despite many searches and the odd circumstances surrounding this case, for example, the various changing stories that his crew members told, Idaho police ruled out foul play. Authorities don't believe the crew was involved in Terrence's disappearance. Instead, they believe that he just wandered off on his own and sadly died of exposure. That he's more than likely still on that mountain somewhere. They just haven't found him yet. Investigators stopped working on this case within weeks, and although it's still technically an open investigation, it appears authorities don't have any plans to revisit it anytime soon. To them, this was just a tragic accident and nothing more. To this day, Terrence has never been found. And although we don't know what exactly happened to him, there are a few theories. Theory number one is that he really did just get lost accidentally and died of either exposure or an animal attack. Whether he really was struggling with an undisclosed mental illness or he did just take off to use the bathroom. It could be possible he just got lost. But if he was attacked by a wild animal, I'm assuming there would be some evidence of that, like shredded clothes or blood or something of that nature. There is a possibility that he fell into an abandoned mine shaft like I mentioned earlier, and it's entirely possible that he is still out there and has just never been found. Another darker theory is that he was met with foul play somehow. One of the things that fuel this theory is the fact that police never found any evidence of him being in the area the crew said he was. Like, even the tracking dogs found nothing. It's weird that the production company reportedly didn't help search for Terrence and then dipped before his family got into town. Some think that their statement about having to restrain Terrence due to his anxiety attack could be a clue. Some think that if they did have to restrain him for some reason, that maybe he was accidentally killed in the process and then disposed of somewhere else. This would explain why his scent was never found on the mountain. But what's weird to me is his missing clothes and his dress shoes that were covered in mud. If police could figure out why those were in the condition they were found in, I think that could be key to figuring out what happened to Terrence. According to his dad, Terrence was the only person of color on this crew, so some think that his disappearance could be racially motivated. But what confuses me is that I feel like it would be really hard for 12 entire people to keep this big of a secret if they were involved. All of the crew members even said that they didn't really know each other prior to this project, so it would be weird for all 12 of them to band together and keep this secret, right? Especially not knowing each other. But then again, I've seen it happen before. Maybe not to this extent, but I'm not putting anything past anyone. Something to note though is that it's been reported that one of the crew members later had to attend therapy over what happened on this trip with Terrence. But That could be for a lot of reasons. This is something very traumatic to go through, so it's not surprising if someone needs therapy over it. Another weird thing that stood out to me was that Terrence's family was later told by Raw TV that Terrence told them that he had to leave 5 weeks early because his mom was having surgery. That was not true, so no one knows why Terrence would have told them that if he actually did. My only thought is that maybe something happened while he was on the job that made him uncomfortable, or maybe he saw something that he didn't want to be a part of and just wanted to come home. I don't know. I always keep coming back to the fact that the tracking dogs never picked up a scent on that mountain anywhere. I don't get how that's possible unless he was never there to begin with. What do you guys think happened to him? His family has since gone on to create this Instagram page, so make sure to go follow and show your support if possible. But it's now been 8 years, and whatever really happened to Terrence on that mountain remains a mystery.
The police sketch haunted me as a child, but hearing the full story as an adult is even more horrifying. Before we get into today's case, if you guys do prefer deep dives, I post a brand new episode on my podcast, The Born Investigation, every single week. Cindy Song grew up in South Korea, but in 1995, she moved to live with her aunt and uncle in Virginia. She was an incredibly likable girl though, so she had absolutely no problems making friends and a new boyfriend, Richard, when she got to the country. It felt like she was honestly just everything that you could want to be and more. She was incredibly funny, she was a sweet girl, she was really nice to everybody, and she was also incredibly intelligent and got great grades. But her life would turn into a living nightmare on Halloween 2001. She was a very busy girl, like I said. She studied hard, she was incredibly intelligent, she was studying art at Penn State University and also working 2 jobs on the side. She deserved a break and to have some fun. Sadly, randomly out of the blue, Richard just broke up with Cindy in the September. He just broke it off out of the blue, and she was really upset. She couldn't understand this, but she decided, I'm just gonna have some fun with my girls and get over it. So when she got invited to a Halloween party, she was like, perfect, this is gonna be the ideal place to let my hair down and also have a bit of a distraction. Cindy and 2 of her friends, Stacy and Lisa, showed up to the Halloween party that night and absolutely danced the night away, literally. They were dancing until about 2 a.m. and then they got invited to like an after party kind of thing. It was very low-key vibe. It was almost just like playing on the PlayStation, that kind of thing. And they didn't want the night to end. They stayed there until about 4 a.m. until Stacy was like, do you know what, Cindy, I'm going to take you back home. So she dropped her off by her apartment and waved goodbye to her, not knowing that that was the last time she would ever see Cindy. The alarm was raised when everybody was suddenly like, do you know what, I've not really heard from Cindy since that party. And everyone else was like, yeah, me too. They were like, do you know what, we're probably best to actually go round to her house and see why she's not answering her phone. And honestly, that threw up even more questions than answers because it was locked and there was no sign of Cindy anywhere. Police searched the house and all that remained of Cindy inside of the flat were her fake eyelashes sat on the side. Now, us false lash wearers will know that's usually something you do right before you go to bed, right? You wouldn't like take off your eyelashes if you were then planning on going back out anywhere, would you? So where had she vanished to between taking off her eyelashes and going to bed? Surely the lashes in the flat proved that she was planning on staying in the apartment that night. There was no signs of a struggle, but her bag and phone were also inside. Chillingly, Cindy was wearing a bunny costume that night, like that was her Halloween outfit, and she hadn't managed to take it off yet, it seems, because it wasn't anywhere in the apartment. And that sent shivers down her friends' spines, because there's no way in hell she comes back from the Halloween party, takes her lashes off, leaves her phone there, and goes out in her bunny costume, which kind of leaves only one haunting alternative. Now, volunteers banded together and scoured the local area, but there was absolutely no sign of the missing girl. Then something really weird happened. A few days after she'd gone missing, a call came into the police. Something had gone down in Philadelphia's Chinatown district. A young woman matching Cindy's description had been seen in or around a car with a man. It seemed like this woman was crying and shouting for help when she was abducted. Eyewitnesses called police and gave a description of the girl and the man, and it seemed to fit Cindy's description, but this image was plastered everywhere, and still nobody has identified this man to this very day. And chillingly, Cindy also has never been found.